was one of the towns that came in. Joe did the photograph.
What games did you play?
When I was young, you see, there weren't a lot of motor cars. So what would come on the roads were particularly empty at the time, really. You'd see people, and you might see horse and traps, pony and traps, people travelled in, and donkey and carts and that sort of thing. And you'd see a lot of dogs. And so we could play on the road quite happily, and nobody bothered us. And cycling, I always fell off because we didn't have bikes. Well, that's moving on. I'll tell you it quickly. My father, because he was a guard, the transport for guards was you had to have a bike. So Daddy had a bike, and every man in the county came for that bike. So he never had it. But anyway, we had to learn on that bike, so it was quite tricky. Because did you learn on the man's bike? No. It had a bar. You see, had your father a bike?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there was a bar across, but we couldn't get over the bar when we were small, so you had a very tricky thing. Say that's the bar of the bike, so you were holding on to the bike, and then you had to, what should we do? Put your leg in, to the other side, and pedal away and balance. So I think we could have gone to the circus and we got a job. And
did you get your own bike eventually?
No, we never did. There were 6 of us. On a guard's salary, so you wouldn't be getting a bike. No.
Were there certain games for certain times?
Yes. In the winter, I suppose it was, we had a lot of snow then. You wouldn't remember that. And I remember in 1947 I was doing my intercert, and we had 7 feet of snow on the ground. So the girls that lived in the country couldn't come to school. So we were delighted we didn't have to go either. So that was throwing snowballs and making snowmen and awfully bad things, throwing water on the road and making a skate. Because of the horses, and they'd fall and people would fall. So there was another guard living next to us, Guard Fergus. Yeah. And he was very strict on the thing, so he used to come out and put salt on it. But when he went away, we were very bold. We went out and threw more water on it. Then we had a skate. But we fell an awful lot of times. But there was a very, you never did any of this, Rita, because you were up in the town, we were sort of half country. And to skate, what you did when you'd be very clever at it, normally you just skate away down and probably fall down. And the other skate was you might go halfway down, and then you'd try to go down like this and do the rest of it.
Right,
so it was very tricky.
Yeah.
And that was winter time. And because the nights were dark, what else would you do?
Did you play with conkers and things in autumn?
Oh yeah, Conquerors sort of the fall of the year, wasn't it? That when Conquerors came, yeah. The boys kind of thought they were the ones for the Conquerors, but all because we had one brother, so we knew all about boys' things, and we all had the Conquerors, and we had a conker tree in the garden, so that was great fun. And what else would boys be doing that we did? Walking on stilts, in the circus. Have you seen those? Yeah. And you'd have to. My brother made mine. I don't know who made the others. Did you ever walk on, Rita?
I don't think so. No.
The poles.
Yes,
and then I don't know how did he put the step on it, and on the road, because everything we did was on the road, and so we practiced fall off, get up again, and try and walk on the stilts. And you did succeed at it,
Where did you live when you were?
On the Cashel Road, just further down. Do you know where the priest lives, Father Anthony?
Yes.
Yeah. Just up from Father Anthony, 1, 2, 3 houses up. They got married in Kerry, and then as a guard you had to move. It was like being in the bank or something. You couldn't stay around the locality because Mammy was from there. So they were moved here. My mother hated every day she was in Fethard. Absolutely, yes.
Did she?
She hated Daddy, loved it. And so they came to Fethard, and there was no place to stay, so they were down in Tierney's. I think, yes, they probably had rooms, what you'd have then. So that's where they were. And then they were in, what was the pub? It's what you call it now, beside the post office.
The sports bar, Butlers.
Butlers, yeah. initially that was a hotel. Or from Burke Street then they went to the Tiri Centre. And I was born there.
How was that? Was it a house?
It was an old school where this is now what I remember from Daddy and my parents telling us. It was called we'd remember it as the old Protestant school. Yeah, and we were always told the man there, the teacher, he committed suicide. Yeah, and so when school was closed, they lived there, and it was haunted.
I believe that.
With this man.
I never knew
But
that.
my mother said she was never at ease there, and none of the guards, they'd often go up and they'd be on duty and they'd go in and stay, and pass away the night kind of, and have tea and the rest of it. But there was all sorts of stories, and they didn't feel comfortable. So how true, I don't know.
Can you remember any of the stories? Or are they appropriate or what?
The stories about the ghosts.
Yeah.
This guard now would be a sensible man. Like I wouldn't know that probably wasn't have been born then. And he was in on duty, but he was in having a sleep, and he was lying on the couch downstairs. And the next thing they didn't know. After some time anyway, he was lying on the bottom of Mammy and Daddy's bed, and then he was terrified, and they were saying, "What's happened?" And he said, every time I got thrown off the couch, and he thought he dreamt something and he fell off, but every time he got up, was thrown off again. So I don't know now, but anyway, they must have known because that's what he told them,
Gosh.
Good.
So I don't know the other stories. Grady's now, because when Mammy lived in Burke Street, she was very happy, and because the neighbours were very lovely and everything. So the Grady's and those people all came to see her. Always went up there, and that one night they went in and they were probably just going to go knock on the door or turn the latch on it or whatever, and it just opened, and there was nobody behind it. So that was another story.
Yes.
I can't really, I suppose I was quite young, remember the rest. We used to get so scared ourselves. So how true, you don't know.
You don't know.
No.
And
then, sorry, go on.
And then what we came to the Cashel Road. Yeah. Now I wouldn't remember that, but say Mella was born in Burke Street. Yeah. And then they moved up there, and my brother that died, Paddy, was born up there. And then when he was about 3, he got meningitis and he died. So they went back to Kerry with him to bury him on Christmas Day. It was really tragic, young couple, and there were 6 of us, but there's only Noel and Austin and myself now.
Is that it?
Yeah, 3 girls are gone, yeah. So I suppose the other thing is we used to spend a lot of time in the barracks. That's where the guard stayed then, was called the barracks, uptown, in the centre of the town. And they had this old-fashioned phone, so we thought it was great to be listening to it, and I think we weren't supposed to be doing, And in the front room was where the guard sat. There was a fire, open fire, and then there was a little bed there, because if they were on duty all night, they had to stay there, so they had to sleep there. And I remember we'd have to bring up cocoa to my father every night at 10. Yeah. See, the station was over there. And actually we played quite a lot there, because where the carriages backed and stayed overnight, the carriages then were absolutely lovely. They were each individual, and they had lovely sort of seats like this, and windows you could let down. And when that was parked, we'd say parked anyway, whatever they did, we'd would be playing in them, We thought they were fantastic.
That's interesting.
And also in the station they had their own well, and they had a huge big wheel, so we used to be doing that.
An interesting place to
we were
play.
allowed in, maybe Sean Callahan was in what would you call the house, where all the levers and that went to change the tracks.
Right.
Yeah, he'd let us, if he was doing it and it was all quiet, he'd let us go in and look at it, And you'd see then the signal going down. We weren't ever supposed to be on the railway line. Never. We lived on it.
No doubt.
And at the railway it was lovely and exciting, and when there was nobody there was a waiting room. Do you remember that, Rita? And a lot of people didn't have flush toilets, and so there was a lovely flush toilet there, so we spent a lot of time flushing the toilet. So that was great fun. We did have a flush toilet at home, but it was more exciting there because of the big room, you know. Yeah. There was great traffic to the station. Everything went on in the station, and it went from Dublin to Clonmel to Cork to everywhere you wanted to go. Didn't go to Kilnall or anywhere out there, but we went everywhere else. And it was really exciting to be on it.
How many meals a day did people have?
Well, you certainly had 3. You got up and you had your breakfast, which was always, you had to have everything. Porridge. I hated porridge. But we got cream on it, you know, so that was nice. And porridge. And I didn't eat eggs. I was a very finicky child. And we drank tea then. We didn't have toast. There wasn't toast, sort of. And just a normal breakfast. If you liked an egg, you could have it. Sunday morning, a fry, which is the rasher egg and sausage, that kind of thing. But if you were going to communion, you couldn't eat before you came back from Mass. So it was very nice. On the way home, you could smell the fry cooking, so that was nice. And at Easter was very exciting because you could eat as many eggs as you liked. Boiled eggs, would you believe it? You got an Easter egg all right, but you were to eat, and we thought it was great to
Boiled
eat
eggs,
boiled
really?
eggs. Yeah, yeah.
What kind of food did you eat? Meat, fish, and what kind of bread was eaten?
You know, start with the meat, mainly meat, maybe fish on Friday, because it only came to the station, and who used to go up for it with a little cart, you know. Some man used to bring it down, but that would be mainly, I'd say, herrings and mackerel. And
Was it Jimmy Fennessy, that man?
no, I don't know, no. And we didn't like fish, really. So we just was stuck to Friday with fish. And what else? You'd have beef. I don't remember lamb now, mind you. It was, people were more beef eaters then, I think.
And you'd have eaten nearly every day.
You would, yeah. Oh, you would, yeah.
The bread maybe?
And vegetables, I didn't like very much. I liked potatoes, cabbage maybe a bit. Wasn't very fond of them, like all children, but you learn to eat them. Yeah.
Did you have your own vegetable patch?
I did. We were very good in the garden because everybody had a big garden at the back. I was just thinking of that today. And Daddy had a garden, but he always had someone to do it. And he had someone to do everything. But he was very good, because he had a bit of a farm as well, because he had cows, and we were very well fed at the time because we had maybe 2 cows, maybe 3, and then he'd have calves, and then we'd have milk, and he'd have. John Holloway used to stop with his pony and cart and bring down the bit of milk we had to the creamery. So that meant through the war we had our own bit of butter, and we got extra because we brought milk.
Very good.
And that was a very hard time, I think, but we never, because he always had a field of wheat, and so he got that milled out in Cluneen. What was the miller out there? Yeah.
Did you help with all these, the livestock in the garden? And
Yeah. We do, what would we have to do? When Daddy would be digging potatoes now or stuff like that, or we'd all have a little patch. I thought one time I could, and he used to have beet, so he'd send it to the sugar beet, and we'd have sugar that way. Through the war, like was a bad, even as a child I remembered, you'd remember the planes going over, and I suppose bread shortage during the war, white bread. And you wouldn't get it because I suppose
it was all ration.
there was embargo on everything from the English government, like you couldn't get stuff in, and because we wouldn't give them the ports, and so then we couldn't get any stuff, so you had to be self-sufficient. So in that sense it was a bit different. He had everything like that, and Mammy was a great cook and everything, and So we
You
were well
managed very
fed.
well.
And then I remember the end of the war, and Daddy was in Clonmel. He'd have to be going in and out there to the barracks in there, and at lunchtime, and we were running back, and he came on, and he had these red things, orangey things, and we hadn't seen an orange, I suppose. And the first of the fruit came back in, and I remember we were so excited we brought it to school to show it off.
So there's big excitement.
You know, yeah. So
Yeah.
that was all those kind of things.
Different
you know.
times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Local fairs. Where were the local fairs held?
Do you remember the cattle fairs?
The local fair in the town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was an awful day. We'd come out from very, very early in the morning. I remember being awake, and they'd be coming down the road, all the cattle and the men, and there might be young boys behind hunting them on. You know, they worked very hard, and very young children, you know, and they'd be up very, very early in the morning and to come walking the roads with the cattle, and they'd all be up in the centre of the town, and you really couldn't go up there then because and people had to put out railings outside their shops and houses because the cattle might break the glass in the windows and things like that. But then after school the whole street would be a mess, you can imagine.
Did you tell stories around the fire?
Yes.
Would you remember them, Kathleen? Or any particular characters?
I particularly remember everything happened while you were eating. After you never got up from the table, you stayed talking and discussing and everything like that. And Tom, or Emerson, a pity he's not here because he had so many stories, and if he didn't have them true, he'd make them up. And he would tell you lovely ones. But stories, yes. My father was good for that now, yeah. And they were mainly sort of ghost stories or stories, things that would happen, you know, that sort of thing. Some funny, some made up, they wouldn't be always true. That the convent was haunted as well. An awful lot of that, the places were haunted and that there were ghosts. So you'd tell everyone these things, you'd be frightened stiff, and then you'd think you're very brave, because when we used to go down to the cross, we used to look across at the old secondary school upstairs, and there was somebody supposed to appear there, and we thought we were very brave. We'd go down every evening and look across, and then nothing happened, it wasn't true. And then we'd go home and we'd be afraid to go to bed, you know, that kind of thing. They thought it wasn't true at all, you know.
I suppose the changes over the years, yeah, that really...
I suppose traffic, cars, that kind of transport. I mean, it was mainly bike or a pony and trap or an ass and cart. That was the way you travelled. So, and the train.
Had you a car now? If you were going to
Yes.
Clonmel, you had a
We
car.
had. But I know we never went to Clonmel. I remember I don't know how old we were, Anne and myself, and we got a £50 each, and we went off on the bus. We were never on the bus. And we went to Woolworths. That was a store that had everything. Lovely place to go for children because it had toys and all the things that we'd like. And we saw these lovely boxes, and we thought we'd spend our money now and buy a box each. We both bought the same kind of a box each. And then in the shop we opened them. They were just boxes. We thought to be full of something. Oh, I never forget it. It was really tragic, yeah. So that was the end of our money.
Yeah, Kathleen, I suppose another thing was the shops. I mean, the main street sure was a different place when you were young.
Yes.
Every house was a shop.
Every place
Every
on
house.
the main street was nearly a shop.
Almost
wasn't
every
it?
place.
And
yeah.
even there was nothing here. There was nothing at the cross. Sure, there wasn't.
No.
You had to go up Kerry Street, and there was a shop there. As you're going up on the left-hand side, Jimmy Hanrahan's, and he sold everything. And he was a lovely man and lovely to children. And we could buy a penny worth of sweets. Now, what was a penny to say? And he'd make, you know, those little. Like a cornet,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
with paper, and he'd fill it up with that.
Do you remember the first telephone or the first television around, or what family would have had the first?
The telephone, the guards' barracks would have had one, and I suppose Mary Goldsborough in the post
Exchange.
office. And what we had then was telegrams, yeah. and there was a telegram boy, wasn't it?
Mm.
And if anybody, they sent telegrams, was messages, would go from one phone to the other post office, and they'd write out, I think that's the way it went, the message, and the boy that delivered that would come to your house.
It'd be nearly always bad news, wouldn't it?
It would be always
really,
something very
yeah.
sad, somebody died or
yeah.
some tragedy that it would bring, because they were expensive things. And what happened after the post office? I think the guards and the post office, they'd be the ones for that. Yeah.
So you hadn't
And I
phone
suppose
when
the
you were-
first of the electricity was up there, you know, the old mill.
Yes, in the Rockler
It got
Road.
knocked down.
Mm.
I mean, that was I think that's where the first electricity thing started. What would you call it? Where it came into being anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the Rockler Road. Was it
Yeah,
that?
do you know, we used to go
Greens were-
swimming
yeah,
down
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And
The Kennels was called.
up in the
wasn't it?
Kennels, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, emigration in your time now when you were a young girl.
Yes,
was
I
there a lot?
emigrated, yeah.
You emigrated. Did a lot of people emigrate?
That's where the station was busy. There would be throngs and throngs and throngs of people. I was did my leaving, and I was thinking, what would I do? And some of my friends went to England nursing. So I wanted to teach, that was my main thing. I thought I'd love to be a teacher. And anyway, I was, like, parents wouldn't say to you what to do. Ours didn't anyway. You could stay at home as long as you like, kind of. But I suppose you thought for yourself. And I was thinking, look, there's this many of us here, or it's time, what will I do, you know? So I decided, first I thought teaching, and then I said that wouldn't be fair to myself, with the rest of them coming on, you know, because I mean, sending 6 of us to secondary school and buying the books for, you know, it was hard on Daddy. And so I said, 2 of my friends went. Joan Henshey, her father was a station master out in Farnaleen, so I knew where they went, and it was sort of a pre-nursing, and I was about 17 and a half. So I wrote, and I was accepted, so I decided that's what I'd do. I'll never forget it. It's still in my mind. I got ready anyway, whatever I wanted, and I decided I'd go off in January. I went after Christmas.
17.
I didn't see the sea before that, and I was, you know, I'll never forget it. So we went to Clonmel, and I got the train, and my farthest journey was ever going into Clonmel on the bus, or Daddy driving us up to Leitrim and those kind of things. But you're never on your own. So I went off anyway, and
all on your own.
yeah,
Gosh.
and I got on that and the train to Rosslare. It was terrible. And then I got on the boat, and that was horrible. I never knew what it was like, and we got out to sea. You can imagine the weather then, and it was as rough as anything, and I was as sick as a dog. So I spent the night, the whole time travelling, up on deck, vomiting over the rail. That's all I can remember. And then it only had firms, and I sat there. I didn't go nowhere to go after that, so I just sat there in the freezing cold. I was lucky I wasn't dead. We got off of that anyway, and we got the train to London. And you had to ask then, I had to go down to Weybridge in Surrey. I mean, it was a beautiful place, a really posh place. And but that didn't, I didn't know anything about that. But anyway, I managed that and got down there, and I must be half dead when I got there because they put me to bed directly. Yes, matron, and it was a small cottage hospital, and they did these, but you couldn't go training till you were 18, and I was 17 and a half. And so Joan Henshey was there, and another girl, Joan Pollard, and we were all the same age, and the English girls. So it was really a lovely, lovely, happy time.
So you were delighted to see them when you got there?
We were children, you know, and it was really lovely. But I'll never forget it. I'll absolutely never forget it. And then crying for home, like, at
Very
night.
nice.
Yeah.
So how long did you spend there then?
Well, I stayed there then till it was time to, we all had to go then when it was time to, you went up to decide what hospital, the training school in London was the major, there was 5 major hospitals which were sort of medical schools as well as nursing schools, and they were the best to go to, and who really said it to me really was my aunt, Mammy's sister. She was matron in Dublin, and she said, if you're going doing nursing, she said, go to England. at that stage you'll get a far better training. And she was very right, you know. So I was at the Royal Free, which is very famous. They had Royal Free, Bart's, University College, Thomas's London, that was the head one, Paddington. They were the 5 main ones. So you really were on the top ones, you know. So you had to have a good leaving cert and all of that there. So it was really very enjoyable. It was like being in school for us then, you know, until we finished. And then sort of did midwifery. I only did the first part. I didn't like it. I was terrified. I thought of 2 lives on my hand, you know. No, my real big thing was you'd have to ride a bike around London. I couldn't manage a bike patrol. So I said no. So I think I came home after that, and I went into Joseph's. See, Anne was home before me. My sister, she was nursing too, but she went a different way, and we probably hardly ever saw one another there. And so she'd applied, and to Cashel and Clonmel, and there was 2 letters there, and she went to Cashel, and so Clonmel was left. So I just, I don't know, a writer went into matron and said, like, I'm available, and she just said, come in, kind of, and
Good.
we have a lifetime there.